Its takeover of Crimea.
What you see is a broad range of destabilizing behavior on the part of the Russians and provocative behavior, not just in Europe but elsewhere. And so what the president has asked us to do is, and the Secretary of State is doing, is to counter Russia's destabilizing behavior where it affects our interests, to take actions to deter any escalation of conflicts or anything that could lead to a confrontation, because this is what we've been avoiding, right, since 1945 with first the Soviet Union and now Russia. I mean, what the United States has done since 1945 from a defense and national security perspective is prevent great power conflict for really an unprecedented period of time, right? And then, but the third thing he's asked us to do is look for areas of cooperation with Russia, right? There are areas, this relationship is at bottom, right? It's at its nadir, right? So, but there are still areas where our interests overlap, and to look for areas of cooperation.
But those sanctions, Russia's in eastern Ukraine, and there is a package allegedly, according to the Wall Street Journal, of armament proposals coming to the president. Have you reviewed that yet, by the way, of the proposal to arm the Ukrainians against the rebels?
Well, we're already giving support to Ukraine. A lot of this is really what kind of support they need to be able to prevent further invasions of their territory, to be able to prevent any kind of aggressive or offensive action, right, against the rest of Ukraine. So what you have is
anti-tank weapons, though?
I think what's useful to talk about is defensive capabilities. Does Ukraine desire, need, based on the situation there, greater defensive capability? I mean, I don't know what that is specifically. It really doesn't matter what it is specifically, but that's one of the things that we're looking at, is what form of support Ukraine needs that's consistent with us and everyone's desire to ensure that Russia doesn't undertake further destabilizing or offensive action that could lead to a much broader conflict. I mean, this is a dangerous situation, but we have to recognize it's a dangerous situation of Russia's creation, right? And so what we're endeavoring to do with our allies is to do everything we can to prevent that conflict from growing.
Does the president have a clear-eyed understanding of the nature of his counterpart in Russia and the nature of the regime?
The nature of the Russian regime?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think everybody is pretty clear on that, right? The nature of the Russian regime is one person, isn't it? I mean, so I think you have an autocratic regime and an individual who's done an extraordinarily effective job at consolidating power. And you have, I think, someone who has acted in a way that I mean, I'm not the best judge of this maybe, but it is not in the interest of the Russian people. And you see that with the reaction from the world, right, in terms of the sanctions that are placed on Russia and a recognition that Russia must play a much more responsible role in the world if it's going to be a full-fledged, welcomed member of the international community. And we're talking obviously about the annexation of Crimea, the invasion of Ukraine here.
The attack on our election.
But also the attack on our election, the very sophisticated campaign of subversion and disinformation and propaganda that is ongoing every day in an effort to break apart Europe and to pit political groups against each other, right, to sow dissension and conspiracy theories. And then, of course, there's the support for this murderous regime in Syria and its support for really Iran's objectives in the Middle East. And so I think that obviously for this range of destabilizing behavior there have to be consequences. But does that prevent us from cooperating with them to maybe begin to resolve the Syrian civil war and end at least a portion of that human suffering? Or where else do our interests align? Certainly they should align on North Korea.
Let me conclude, General McMaster, and thanks for the time, by talking about your role in the White House and the White House generally. Reset. According to Administrator Shulkin, was on my program this week, Cabinet Member Shulkin said there was a reset at the Cabinet meeting this week, and General Kelly's arrival has really changed the nature and tone of the White House. Do you agree with that? What does General Kelly's arrival mean?
Well, General Kelly's arrival means is you have an extraordinarily talented leader with a broad range of experience. And people, of course, see a retired Marine Corps general, and they recognize that he has an extraordinary record of accomplishment within the military. But he also has a broad range of experience now outside the military as in Homeland Security, where he took over a very complex organization and made tremendous progress advancing the president's agenda and our national interests as a cabinet secretary. But also he's someone who has had extraordinary experience overseas in complex environments which entail operating with people from all departments and agencies, with indigenous leadership, with allies, and he also has a lot of experience on the Hill as well. And so in terms of experience level, demeanor, leadership ability, it's going to be great for all of us, I think, in terms of improving our ability to operate together as a team. Now, a lot of the conventional wisdom was, gosh, it's chaotic over there in the White House and everything else. I'll just tell you, I am very proud of our national security team overall, and that's with here.
You've seen real chaos, commanding in northern Iraq, commanding in Afghanistan. I mean, you've seen the chaos of war. Compared to that, it's not a chuckling matter, but when you hear stories of chaos, isn't that kind of absurd compared to the real thing?
Right, and what we're doing is we're delivering what we're calling integrated strategies based on the president's guidance. And so what we had, and this is maybe understandable, and I don't mean this in a pejorative sense, but the White House and the National Security Council, as part of that, became very tactically focused. It became very operational. We're supervising like troop numbers and specific authorities, and what we've been able to do is devolve authorities back to where they belong. And instead of thinking about tactics, the next little move, we've been trying to view problem sets and opportunities through the lens of our vital national interests, establish goals. Imagine that. Establish goals for our foreign policy and national security strategies, and then define more specific objectives, and then orient our efforts, political, military, economic, toward accomplishing those objectives.
Very last question. Your famous book, Dereliction of Duty. I read the last chapter again last night when you talk about McNamara and Ball and Dean Rusk, and you were very critical of them for not giving the president candid, straightforward advice, limiting options. Were you naive at the time, now that you're living that life? I mean, would you rewrite that chapter differently now that you're living that life in the middle of giving the president advice?
No, I wouldn't rewrite a word of it. And I think actually my experiences have just amplified, I think, for me, the importance of doing our duty, all of us doing our duty, to give the president our best advice, right? And so what we do here in the National Security Council is we integrate the efforts of all the departments and agencies, and sometimes efforts of our multinational partners, to provide options to the president. And then once the president makes a decision, we help drive sensible and effective execution of his decisions. And so I had the tremendous benefit. It was a real gift to me, right, to have the opportunity to research, read, and about a previous difficult period in history from the lens of the president and his key advisors, civilian and military advisors. And so I think that has helped. Doesn't give any answers, right, but it's helped me ask the right questions and to make sure that, that I at least give it my best shot, right, try to do my best for the president and the nation.
General H.R. McMaster, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Hugh. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
That concludes my interview with National Security Advisor General McMaster. When I come back, Bloomberg's Eli Lake, one of the country's leading national security analysts, join me to discuss what we